Okay, all right, let's go ahead and begin. The name of our reading is Bo. Hey, Bo. And Bo means go. That's interesting. Um, and it's drawn out of the beginning, which is Exodus 10, verse 1. Then Adonai said to Moses, go. This is where we get the word for the beginning of the reading. Okay, go to Pharaoh, because I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, so that I might show these my signs in their midst. Now, the word B-O, bow, okay, which in most English Bibles is translated go. Okay, as if God is looking at Moses and going, go. But you remember that Hebrew isn't always like that. It doesn't work very well in English. And do you remember back when we looked at Abraham and Isaac? And when you read in your English Bible, what you read is that Yehovah spoke to Abraham, said, Abraham, take your son, your only son that you love, and go offer him on the mountain. You remember that? Do you remember that we learned that the Hebrew of that is not a command, that God is asking Abram to do it, and there's a word in there that's almost never translated, which is the word please. So what God is doing with Abraham is he's asking him, Abraham, please, would you go offer Isaac? Okay? Sometimes English makes God out to be rather mean. All right? This is another one of those verses and those words. Okay? So it isn't go, and the reason is the word bow, the number one meaning of the word bow isn't go, it's come. So, in other words, remember when God met Moses at the bush? Okay, everybody remembers that. And remember, Moses asked, when I go there and I tell these people, okay, whom? No. At the very beginning, God said, Moses, I want you to go in and I want you to give my word to Pharaoh. And Moses asked, who am I that I should do this? Right? And do you remember what God's answer was? I will be with you. That was his answer. Okay? This word here, bow, is drawn out of that idea that God will be with Moses. So God is inviting Moses to go with him into Pharaoh to give him the words. Okay? In other words, we're going to go together. I'm not going to be sitting on this mountain while you go do all my work, and then later you'll meet me again on the mountain. That isn't the way it worked, right? Okay? So that's the meaning. Come with me. I will take you into Pharaoh. Okay? Now, we already went over, we already went over the last week, we went over the beginning of the plagues. And we're gonna get to the bottom of them tonight. We're gonna get to the end of them tonight. Okay? Now, Yehovah wanted to strike Pharaoh in his own house. Okay? In the very center of his power. In order to be free, the power of Pharaoh had to be completely broken. Okay? And, well, you remember in Hebrew, there's different levels of reading a text, right? In the beginning, there's the literal words. Okay, what do the literal words mean? But then there's another level, okay? So another level of this idea of Yehovah delivering Israel out of Pharaoh's grip is God delivering us out of the devil's grip, right? Just as God wanted to break Pharaoh's power, he wants to break the devil's power in our lives. Okay? So if you're worried, guess what that means? It means the devil has a hold in your mind, and you are allowing him to bring worry and anxiety into your mind. Okay? You can break that, right? And we know how to break that. How do we break that? Father, forgive me for allowing worry or anxiety into my life. About what? About anything. About my family. About my health. About my wealth. About our nation. About anything. Okay? It works in every realm. Right? Okay. Now, moving on, we read in the verse that we just read these words, I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants. Okay? Now, we already know from what we've read last week that there was a hardening that went on in Pharaoh's heart. And there we looked at the Hebrew word hazak, which means strengthen. So what was happening is whenever Pharaoh would get hit by a plague, then God would lift him back up. Why would he do that? Not just because God was mean and wanted to beat him up. He did it because he's giving him another chance to do what is right. But he's not doing what is right, and he's not going to do what is right. And we have the advantage of being able to look back on it and not being in the middle of it, figuring it all out, right? Because we have the words that have been given to us. Okay? Now, we're gonna look at this a little bit more about this idea. Pharaoh challenged Yehovah. Direct challenge. Remember? He said, I don't know who you are, and I'm not going to let Israel go. Okay, I don't know Yehovah. I don't know who your God is, and I'm not going to let Israel go. Okay, now, in this verse that we just read, there's a new word that is used that doesn't mean strengthen. Okay, it means make heavy. It's the word abode. Abode, which is also the word that means glory, by the way. Okay? The word glory means weight, made weighty, made heavy. So what's going on here is what is God doing? You know, why is God doing something new? Why is there a new word that is being used here? And when you read it in English, it almost looks like God is the one that is going into Pharaoh's mind and heart and making him be stubborn. Okay? That's what it looks like when you read it. And then when you go and read some of what we're going to read in Romans, it looks like that as well. Okay? Maybe that is, or maybe that isn't what is really going on here. Okay? Now, if we look at last week's reading, and we remember what was going on in Pharaoh. He would get to the end of one of the plagues, and he would change his mind, right? He'd be like, all right, I'll let you guys go. No, I'm not going to let you go. Things got better. He didn't remember, or it didn't matter because he was lying, because he was Pharaoh, all right? But this week in our verse, something else is going on. If we go back to the very end of the last plague, which is in 9, Okay, chapter 9. This is what happens. We read this. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said to them, here it is, I have sinned this time. He never said those words. Okay, right then. Yehovah is righteous, while I and my people are wicked. Pray to Yehovah. There has been enough of God's thunders and hail. I will let you go. You don't have to stay any longer. So what that means is Pharaoh is realizing that God is real. He's realizing that maybe Pharaoh, isn't God, okay? Or if he is, he's a little God, okay? He is realizing the enormity of what is going on, the enormity of what he has done, and then he changes his mind again. How is that any different? Because in the beginning, he's acting like a guy who doesn't know. He just doesn't know. I don't know who Yehovah is. I'm not letting your people go. Now he knows, and he won't let them go. Okay, the word of this is rebellion. It's willful rebellion against what you know is true. Okay? Which is the great big S sin in the Bible, is rebellion. Somebody brought something up. David and I were talking earlier about how words don't work sometimes, Hebrew words in Greek or in English. And an example of that is the word unbelief. You guys know the word unbelief. Unbelief doesn't mean just not believing. Okay, simply, well, I believe that these glasses are real. Or I don't believe those glasses are real. Okay, that isn't unbelief. Unbelief in Hebrew, I wondered, it's like, what is that word in Hebrew? And I realized there is no word in Hebrew for unbelief. It's rebellion. That's what unbelief is. Unbelief is rebellion. So the idea of unbelief is the idea that you know what is right, but you do what is wrong anyway. You know what is real, but you ignore it anyway. You know that there is a God, and you know that there's going to be judgment, but you ignore it. Okay? Which, by the way, is the life of most human beings on earth, according to the writings of Paul. Okay? So I have in here Romans 1. So we're going to go to Romans 1, and we're going to look at what Paul writes about this idea of rebellion and what it looks like in the world. Okay? So, in Romans 1, he writes this: the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. That word all means all. Okay? In unrighteousness, they suppress the truth. Because what can be known about God is plain to them. For God has shown it to them. His invisible attributes, his eternal power, and his divine nature have been clearly seen ever since the creation of the world, being understood through things that have been made. So, people are without excuse. Okay, just stop right there and think about that. Think about how we have asked, I have asked, yeah, God, but what about those people in wherever, remote jungle of the Amazon, who never knew about you. Well, they may have never known his name, but they knew, because all I had to do was open their eyes and look. Okay? So that's what he's writing here. Okay? It says, for even though they knew God, they did not glorify him as God or give him thanks. Instead, their thinking became futile. In other words, they lost their minds. They lost the ability to reason. Reasonably, I look at the mountains, and I look at the ocean, and I look up at night. It is reasonable for me to believe that there is a creator who did all this. Okay? Thank you. It's unreasonable to believe that it just happened. Okay? So, you get where he's going with this. Okay, their senseless hearts were made dark. By the way, in Hebrew, the word heart is the word leb, and it doesn't mean your emotions. Okay? It means your mind. So, in Hebrew, when you read all those words in Hebrew about your heart, it means your mind. It's your will, your mind there. Okay? Claiming to be wise, I could stop there and say they even have degrees at the end of their names, right? PhD and whatnot. Not that there's anything wrong with that. However, there are a lot of those that have those letters after their name that believe that they're wise, but what are they? Fools. They exchange the glory of the immortal God for an image in the form of mortal man and birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Okay? Were they doing that in Egypt? Yeah. I mean, you can look at the idols today. I was in Italy in a museum, and I looked at a whole area that was ancient Egyptian idols. There were hundreds of them, and that doesn't count the big ones, the Sphinx and all those idols. Okay, now watch what God does. Therefore, God gave them over in the evil desires of their hearts to impurity, and listen to this, even to dishonor their bodies with one another. They traded the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and served the creation rather the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Okay, God gave them over. What does that mean? God gave them over. He allows us to do anything, doesn't he? I mean, allow. What does the word allow mean? We all have free will. God does not override our free will. Okay? In general, he does not do that. Okay? But what does he do? How does God want to reach us? What does he use in order to reach us? Number one thing that he uses: love, relationship, nice words. How about words? How do you reach your 5-year-old when you want your 5-year-old to do something? You use words. You begin with words. This is what God does all in the Torah and all in the prophets. He uses words. Okay? And this is what he does with Pharaoh. Again and again, he gives him his word. Now, Moses and Aaron are the ones that give him the word, but they give the words. Okay? Now, later in Romans, Paul writes about Pharaoh. Okay? And this is not easy, because we could easily go a month on Romans 9. Okay? So we're going to lift a couple of verses here out of Romans 9, and I'm going to do my best to give a little explanation about what they mean, because they bother us, these verses. Okay, the Scripture says, what does he mean by that? He means the Torah, right? It's written in Torah for this very purpose. I raised you up to demonstrate my power in you, so my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. Stop right there. In other words, here's a guy who believes that he is God on earth. He rules over his own kingdom, and he rules over Bnai Yisrael, who are in the land. And he rules over them with an iron hand. And he's even murdered or wanted to murder their babies because they were growing too much. And he subjects them to slavery and bondage and harshness and makes their life miserable. Okay? So this is the will of this man who is king of Egypt. Now God is going to look at that man and go, you know what? I am going to be exalted, and I'm going to use you to do it. Okay? Pharaoh has no idea what is about to happen. He has no idea that this is what's going on, even though the words have been given to him more than once. Okay? So this is what God is going to do. Now, at the end of that verse in Romans, we read, so then he has mercy on whom he wills, and he hardens whom he wills. Uh-oh. Man, I wish that you didn't write it that way. Paul is the guy. Okay. That he has mercy on whom he wills is an argument that God is allowed to be merciful. If God were not being merciful, what would have happened in Egypt? Pharaoh would have dropped dead. Day one, Moses and Aaron would have gone in and looked at him, said, let my people go. I don't know who your God is. I don't know. No, I'm not going to let your people go. Boom. He drops dead. That would have been righteous. So what is God doing? God is being merciful. He's being merciful, and through his mercy and the hardness of Pharaoh's will, he's going to be exalted. God is going to be exalted. Now, later on, when we get to the name of Yehovah being revealed, when he hides Moses in the rock, and he passes by him, and he gives him the name, Yehovah, Yehovah, and all those words that go after the name, all those great, beautiful words. All right, when we look at that, we'll look more at this idea of making an argument for his mercy. Everybody wants to make an argument for his justice. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. That's obvious, and it's reasonable. What isn't reasonable is that he's merciful. Really. I mean, think about all of the ways that we have rebelled. And by we, I don't just mean individually. I mean we as a nation, we as the world, we as human beings in general. Think of all of the ways that we have rebelled against him, and yet here we are. Another day, right? It's his mercy. That's why it's his mercies are new every morning, right? Okay. He hardens who he wills, is Paul's way of saying that God has the right to use man's hardness for his own purpose if he wants. Okay? Pharaoh hardened his own heart. You could look at it like this. I didn't write this down, but you could look at it like this. when God increases the revelation, okay, so that he knows more, and he knows more, all he's doing is adding water into the cement that's already there. That's all he's doing. He's adding water into it, okay? It's not like he's making him do this. He's using him as he's doing this, okay? And you know what? In a way, I think God does that with the devil as well. I think he uses the devil. Have you ever thought about that? Well, okay. So anyway, we'll move on because we could be there forever. Okay, now this way of dealing with Pharaoh is the way that God even dealt with Israel. Okay? So you remember his own people that were delivered out of Egypt, then they rebelled. And they rebelled a lot. Okay? And he gave them warnings over and over and over again. In Isaiah, he said this, okay? Make the heart of this people fat. Make their ears heavy and their eyes blind, else they would see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and return and be healed. Okay, what does that mean? That means, look, I am going to give you my word, and then I'm going to give it to you again, and then I'm going to give it to you in a different way, and then I'm going to give it to you in another way, and whenever I do that and you rebel, you get harder. So the way that God hardens is he gives his word. Right? Okay? Now, even Yeshua used the words of Isaiah when he was confronting the religious leaders of Israel in his day. Okay? And remember, he used those words of Isaiah. Your hearts are hard, you're blind, your eyes don't see. And he quoted Isaiah. Why? Because they wouldn't listen to him. And by listen, I mean shema, hear and obey. Right? Okay. Now, next verse in Exodus. We've done one verse. Now we're going to do the next verse, and we'll pick it up a little bit. Okay. And so you may tell your son and your grandchildren what I've done in Egypt, as well as my signs that I did among them, so that you may know that I am Yehovah. In the New American Standard, it reads, that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your grandson how I made a mockery of the Egyptians. Okay? Made a mockery. God in this Moses in this verse, and God in this verse is giving us the idea of how important it is to remember. This is why in the ears of your son and your grandson, you've got to remember. Dennis Prager wrote this, without remembering, there is no gratitude, no wisdom, and no faith. Without remembering. You've got to remember. Remember what? Remember what God has done. Remember what God did with Israel in Egypt. And remember what God has done in your life. Right? Remember. But don't only you remember. Hand it off so that the next generation remembers. If there's any area of life that I have been feeling like we as a nation need to be on our knees saying, God, forgive us, is we didn't hand it off. We let it go. We let the next generation go. I don't mean you individually. Maybe you did a great job. But as a nation, we let it go. That's why we are where we are. Because we didn't remember. We didn't remember how we were founded. We didn't remember why the commandments of God mattered. We just didn't remember. Kids used, I believe, they used to learn this in school. And now it's illegal to learn it in school. So, anyway, remembering matters. Okay, now, when we read how I have made a mockery of the Egyptians, okay, in Hebrew it means overdo, mock, or play with. So what God is saying here is, I want your grandchildren, I want them to know how I played with the Egyptians. Okay? So that you may know that I am Yehovah. He wants to be the ultimate superhero in the lives of in our lives and in our children and in our grandchildren. He is the ultimate good guy. He is for us. He delivers us. Okay? So I think I wrote, remember this, the next time you're tempted to elevate the power of the devil. And remember the extreme value that Yehovah places on you and your children and on passing on his ways. You know, I had work that I needed to do this weekend. I'm getting Matthew ready to be in a book. I'm not done working on Galatians and Ephesians. I have a list, and it's a long list. And my wife says, the grandchildren are going to be at our house. And they're going to be here overnight. And I had a moment. I actually had a moment where I went back to where I was like in my 30s, and I was having this same feeling. But I need to, I must, my list, And God reminded me of this verse right here. And he was like, you know what? Be with your grandchildren. You got to hand it off as much as you can hand it off. Okay? Isaiah, I threw this in there from Isaiah. That, okay, so we have the idea that God is playing with the Egyptians. Now, the fact that God plays with the devil is illustrated in Isaiah. Isaiah 14 is about the king of Babylon. Okay? Now, God is going to use the king of Babylon in order to discipline Judah. Right? The king of Babylon is going to come in, and they're going to take Judah into exile. God is going to use him in that. But when it's over, God is going to judge the king of Babylon for the way he treated Judah. Okay? Doesn't mean he made them do it. It just means he knows what's going on. He's smarter than we are. Okay? So in Isaiah, he writes about this king of Babylon, which, by the way, are the verses that most of us use when we're thinking about the devil and who the devil is. Okay? Are these words in Isaiah. Now, a lot of people say, well, that isn't about the devil. That's about the king of Babylon. It can easily be about both. If you remember how we have those levels of meaning in Hebrew, it can easily be about both. Okay? I believe that it is. So here's the words. These are the words given to the devil, if you want to look at it this way. You will be brought down to the place of the dead, to the lowest parts of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you, reflecting on what has become of you. Is this the one who shook the earth, who made kingdoms tremble? Get it? In other words, Isaiah is saying that people are going to look at the devil and go, I was afraid of him. Okay? That's what's going to happen with Pharaoh. Same deal. Okay, moving on in Exodus. Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh and said to him, this is what Adonai, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go so that they may serve me. The word there in Hebrew, serve, avodah, is the word worship as well. Okay? Some English Bibles have the word worship there, that they may worship me. But worshiping him is serving him, and the other way around. Now, up to now, Moses and Aaron have not given quite the ultimatum that they're about to give. Okay? It's like they grow in confidence after every plague. Well, wouldn't you? I mean, remember in the beginning, they did the blood in the river, and then Pharaoh made them increase the amount of bricks that they needed, right? And Moses was like, I can't do this. God, you haven't delivered anybody. And God's like, look, I got a little game. Okay, we're going to do this game a little while, and in the end, it's going to be all right. That would be worth remembering. Okay? So now they go into the ruler of the world, if you will, okay, one of the most powerful individuals in the world, and they look at him and go, how long are you going to refuse to bow down? Excuse me? Okay. Jehovah hardened Pharaoh's heart by playing off of Pharaoh's own ego, his own pride, his own stubbornness, because that was really Pharaoh's problem. He believed he was a god, and the idea that he was merely a man like every other was way beyond his grasp, and he would not step down. Okay? His own pride was his own downfall. Okay? From here on out, Pharaoh would be trying to hold on to his power and save a little face. That's what's going to happen next. Okay? Now, the reminder at the end of that verse, that they may serve me, reminds us that freedom is not about doing whatever you want. Okay, that's not freedom in God's eyes. Freedom in God's eyes is freedom to worship him, to be good, to do what is right. Okay? So, Moses and Aaron, they go on. Or else, if you refuse to let my people go, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your borders. Which is exactly what happened. Okay? By the way, in Egypt, there was a jackal-headed god named Anubis, who was the guardian of the fields, whom the locusts would eat, presumably, because all their gods were judged through these judgments that happened. Now, look what happens next. Pharaoh's own servants said to him, how long will this man, meaning Moses, be a snare to us? Send the men so that they may serve Adonai their God. Don't you realize yet that Egypt is being destroyed? Pharaoh's own servants are beginning to turn against him, and it makes him all the more unwilling to relent. Although his words at the end of this plague are going to be 10:8. Moses and Aaron were brought to Pharaoh again. Go, serve Yehovah your God. Okay? But who's going to go? Who will be going? Sounds like a wheeler dealer. Okay? Yeah, you know what? You can go, but who do you want to go? Okay? Who exactly is going? And Moses says, everyone. We're all going. Okay? Now, Pharaoh refuses, and the locusts come. Okay? After the locusts, he hardened his heart again, and then the darkness came, right? Of all the gods of Egypt, none were worshipped more than the sun god. Sun god was known as Re, Ra, Adam, Adon, different names. Okay? And when the darkness was over, Pharaoh said, all right, go with your children, but leave your cattle behind. And Moses said, that's not going to happen. We're taking everyone and everything. Now, right now, Pharaoh's pride and anger rise up, and he does something very dangerous. Okay? He gives an ultimatum and a threat that are going to be the very ultimatum and threat that God's going to use against him. So by his own words, he's going to convict himself in it, right? When he says angrily, get away from me, and you will never see my face again. Because on the day that you do, you will die. And Moses says, right, you said it. May I never see your face again. Reading on, now Adonai had said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will thrust you out altogether. It isn't just going to be a go ahead. It's going to be get out of here now, and I'll help you with your luggage. I'll give you gas, anything. Just get out. Here's the keys. Leave. Okay? And here's what the plague was going to be that was announced. And all the firstborn in the land of Egypt will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on his throne, and the maidservant behind the meal, along with all the firstborn cattle. Now, you may not realize this, but this is a measure for measure judgment. Why? Because at the very beginning of all of this, the very beginning words of Moses unto Pharaoh were, Israel is my what? Firstborn son. Okay? They took God's firstborn. Now he's going to take their firstborn. Sounds like vengeance. But you remember the words, vengeance is mine, says Yehovah. Okay, not yours, not mine, but his. All right? But, he goes on, says, not so much as a dog will growl against any of B'nai Israel, neither man nor beast, so that you may know that Yehovah makes a distinction between the Egyptians and Israel. Okay? You may remember back in Genesis 1, we looked at the idea that God divides. Genesis 1 is not about God uniting. It's about God dividing. The only ones that God wants to unite are everyone who loves him and follows him. He wants those to be united. Everybody else, it's a division, isn't it? Even Yeshua looked at the religious leaders and his own disciples, and he was like, I know everybody says I'm here to bring peace on the earth, but I'm not. I'm here to bring division. Okay, what is the division? What does that mean? It means dark and light, good and evil. There is a division. It's not gray. Okay? So there's going to be a division between Israel and Egypt. Okay? Now, the next chapter deals with remembering what is going to happen, because this is going to be Passover. Right? When the death passes over the house of the Israelites who put the blood of the lamb on their door. And look at what is in verse 1 of 12. Now, Yehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month will mark the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year for you." In other words, we're doing a reset on your calendar. Okay? And this month is going to be month number 1. So really, the new year for Israel isn't Rosh Hashanah. Okay? It's Passover. So they have more than one new year in Israel. You know that. Okay, they have the one that we do, or that they do, that we know of as trumpets, which is Rosh Hashanah, the new year. That's like the new civil year. The new year spiritually begins in the month of Nisan, when they do Passover and unleavened bread. Okay? Now, we're going to look at the parallels between what Jews and Israel do in order to remember Passover and what happened to Jesus on the day he died. Because he died on Passover. He was the Lamb of God, right? Okay. In 1 Corinthians, Paul writes that Messiah is our Passover lamb and has been sacrificed. So look at these. Look at this list. Okay, one of the things that happens is you are to remove leaven from your house. Okay, and the reason is, in that regard, leaven is symbolic of sin and uncleanness, and you want to get it out of your house. So you do that, and when Yeshua was about to go to the cross, he went into his Father's house and cleansed it. Remember? Okay, he was getting the leaven out of his house. Okay? The lambs were brought from Bethlehem, where they were born and raised. Isn't that interesting? And they were brought into Jerusalem and the temple area. Yeshua was born in Bethlehem, entered Jerusalem and the temple area, riding on a donkey. When he did, people would have been singing, I spelled that word wrong, okay, from the Hallel Psalms. One of them is this: Hoshiana, please, Adonai, save us. We beseech you. Adonai, prosper us. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Blessed is he who comes in the name of Adonai. We bless you from the house of Adonai. The meal that they were to eat in Egypt that night, the Passover meal, was to be remembered for all generations. Yeshua, at his Last Supper, gave a memorial for all generations, right? Whenever you do this, remember me, okay? The firstborn of the lambs were offered. Yeshua was known as the firstborn of Yehovah, and the firstborn from the dead, and among many brothers, and over all creation. The lambs were to be inspected for 4 days. Make certain that they had no blemishes. Yeshua was inspected by the religious leaders for 4 days. The lambs were to be without blemish. Yeshua was without blemish. He was without sin. The lambs were to be bound for slaughter. Yeshua was bound or nailed to the cross. Israel was to put the lamb's blood on the doorpost. Yeshua's nail marks match the image of a doorpost. Okay? The lambs were killed at 3 in the afternoon, and the high priest would utter the words, "It is finished." Yeshua died at 3 and uttered the words, "It is finished." Okay, the lamb's bones could not be broken. Yeshua's bones were not broken. The lamb was not to be left until morning. Yeshua was removed from the cross before morning. The Egyptians buried their firstborn the day after Passover. Yeshua would have been buried on that day. The lamb's blood saved the Israelites from death. Yeshua's blood saves all of those who trust in him from death. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Wow, we don't know what we've missed not doing Passover every year, right? So we've been doing it here now for over 11 years. And, man, the depth of what goes on. It just, for me, it always increases my trust and decreases my worry. Whenever we do this, whenever we remember and we do this. Okay, the last chapter of the reading is when it is mentioned, and we're going to learn more about this later in Leviticus. Okay, the redemption of the firstborn. So you read in Exodus 13th chapter. So when your son asks you in times to come, what is this? Okay, so you're getting the leaven out of your house, you're getting a lamb, you're getting everything ready, and the children are like, what are you doing? What is this? Okay, this is what your words are going to be. By a strong hand, Yehovah brought us out from Egypt, the house of bondage, and when Pharaoh refused to let us go, Yehovah slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both men and animals. So I sacrifice to Adonai all firstborn males, but I redeem the firstborn of my sons. So it will be like a sign on your hand and like frontlets between your eyes. For by a strong hand Adonai brought us out of Egypt. Now, what is going to ensue later is a ceremony that is given in Torah that every firstborn male that is born is to be redeemed, and the way, or bought back, and the way that is given that they're bought back is with silver given to the priests and the work of the Lord. Okay? So did you know that? Some of you knew that. Some of you didn't know that. We are going to do that here. I don't know when yet, but I'll be giving you a little bit more information about that, because if you've never done it, you might want to do it, because it's in Torah. So, how much? Oh, I don't know when. Someday. Redemption of the firstborn. Okay, meaning I have one. Okay. It's given for males, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it for girls. Okay, it's not circumcision, it's redemption. All right, and the way that it is done is it's about $40. So I know it sounds weird, but it's in Torah. Okay, it's how many shekels? 5 shekels of silver, which is about $40, give or take. Okay, so I've done this already for people who are here. And what I do is in my office I have silver, and $40 goes in the offering, and I wave it, and I say, this is for the redemption of the firstborn, Yehovah. Just like that. It's that simple. Yeah. Okay, anyway, I gave you a little list that you might enjoy, 9 reasons to remember. Okay, so you can read that on your own. So now I want to see if you have any questions, because we have several minutes. So who's got a question? Okay, Ani. Yes, Priscilla. Thank you. Ani's over here.